Let's just see agenda. I've got a big one here, so just okay, access camera, try.
Looks like we are still in the.
Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. And Debbie Allen, are you ready?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Could we have roll call?
Allen,
Allen, present.
Brown, Frost,
Here.
Kobe, Leonard.
Here,
Thank you.
Leonard here.
Sanchez,
Sanchez here.
Shepro,
here.
Kenyon,
Here.
you're out.
All right. We need a motion to approve the minutes. and
Allen
have
moves.
Unanimous to,
What you need is a request for unanimous consent
yes,
to approve the minutes and place them on
right.
file.
Then we don't have to make our
Roll call.
secretary do the roll call.
Right.
Is there a motion or
A
just to-
request.
a request? Unanimous, Mr. Frost makes it. Mr. Brown seconds.
No,
Say what? You don't need to. Okay.
unanimous consent is just, if there's no,
All right.
is so ordered.
Okay, it's so ordered. Okay. Here we are. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. We'll talk about our Kane County partners. Mr. Steve Arnold.
Good morning. First thing I would like to address is it was reported to me at last month's County Ag Committee that the ethics officer had approved our board of directors request to provide complimentary Farm Bureau memberships to members of the Agriculture Committee. As I look around the room, Mr. Brown, Mr. Shepro, Mr. Kenyon, Mr. Praz, I think you are all already Farm Bureau members, and we appreciate that very much. What this offer was basically to expose you as county board members to our professional level of membership and the information services that we provide, not only through our monthly Kane County Farmer, and I've got some of these in the back of the room, but I think each of the four of you should have received it in the mail. But that level of membership will also get you a weekly Farm Week from the Illinois Farm Bureau out of Bloomington, and a quarterly Partners magazine. This quarter's Partners is the local food issue, so I'll make sure that Janice and Matt get a copy of it also. But that's was our primary intent in offering the complimentary membership, and we're pleased that the ethics officer approved that. Each of you has a packet in front of you that the first page is that complimentary membership application. You're already members. What we will do then is pay your renewal, which comes due October 1. And if that is an associate membership, we will change it to a professional membership, so you get the Farm Week on a weekly basis. The second page in the packet that I gave the county board members was actually a promotional effort to solicit professional members, and tells you what you can receive in addition to the information services. So we do 7 statewide conferences every year. Registration runs from a low of $35 to a high of $100 for those conferences. And we will pay that conference registration fee if any professional member wants to attend any of those meetings, whether it's our national convention, our specialty growers annual meeting, our Young Leaders Conference. Unfortunately, none of us in this room look like we qualify for that by an age measure. Governmental Affairs Conference, a Farm Income and Innovation Conference, a Live Local Conference, and an annual meeting of our association every year in December in Chicago. So if you are interested in those as we move forward, again, that is one of the benefits of the professional membership. And then the third page is something that we send to all individuals who apply for membership in our association to tell them a little bit more about who we are and what we do. The final page is actually a letter that board members who may not be, or Ag Committee members who may not be Farm Bureau members will get in the mail once their application is received, that tells them how to complete the transaction. In the case of county Ag Committee members, there's nothing required to complete the transaction, but often we get applications for membership without payment. So I have left packets for the remainder of the Ag Committee with the chairman, and he will see to it that they get put into mailboxes here for those of you who are not Farm Bureau members. And all you need to do is complete the application on page 1. I can pick them up at the July meeting of the Agriculture Committee, or they can be returned to us in the mail, and they are all stamped complimentary. Several other things that by way of an update, the Farm Bureau assisted state commodity associations, pork, beef, soybeans, and others with a farm visit last week? It was June 9th at the farm of Chris Gould, and we welcomed their Representative G.T. Thompson of Pennsylvania, who is the minority leader on the House Agriculture Committee. So it was an opportunity while he was in the area. He has family in Elgin, and it was an opportunity to do a little meet and greet with the Ag Committee minority leader. Our young farmers are working or are planning a bonfire for Monday. And as part of that, we will share some information, including information from the Ag Committee and from Mr. Tansley about a farmland buying online program that I believe is being offered next Thursday through, oh, can you help me here, Matt? I just lost it. Liberty Prairie Foundation with a farmland lending expert from Compeer Financial. We're also promoting with our young farmers, and this goes hand in hand with the local food issue of partners. We're doing some virtual cooking events statewide for young farmers to learn how to use some of the produce that's coming out of the farm fields now. Speaking of which, there are refrigerator magnets back in the back of the room that tell what's in season. So if you'd like to pick up something to remind you what you should be eating that's coming out of the farm fields and gardens, that's in the back of the room. The Farm Bureau is also working on county fair promos for the King County Fair. We're working on a volunteer appreciation and scholarship recognition program that we will do on August 6th at a King County Cougars game. Because of COVID, we could not do a traditional scholarship recognition ceremony in the spring.
I have to vote on.
We're also working with Matt to promote Farmers in the Classroom through JJC. And my understanding is that one of our directors sent you a response to that call for presenters this morning. So you may not have seen that yet. And then on Tuesday, the County Farm Bureau and the Development Committee, along with the Illinois Farm Bureau, are looking to welcome the Lieutenant Governor for a farm visit at Klein's Quality Produce in the Burlington area, a visit to the business of food which does some freezing of fresh vegetables over in Sycamore, and then a visit to the Farm in the School program at Joliet Junior College. So that concludes my report.
Are there any questions of Mr. Arnold? Mr. Shepro?
Maybe this is for later, and if so, you'll tell me, I'm sure. We're reading now with everything being reopened that bars, restaurants, et cetera, are actually not being able to fully reopen because they can't find people to do the work. And I wondered if that has been seen in the agricultural sector.
I'll defer to Mr. Magnuson.
Yeah, I think the labor shortage even predated the pandemic, but it is somewhat of a challenge. I'm not aware where it's impacted a producer where they've had to change their acreage or their business to this point. But and you're right, I was going to talk a little. There are efforts to automate and use robotics, and part of that is driven by the inability to attract labor onto the farm.
I read a recent article in the Wisconsin Farm paper that John Deere is having a problem
Yes.
fully staffing, and because of that, they can't provide the new vehicles to sell.
Yes, that's right too. Yeah.
And then most of their facilities they were talking about are in Iowa. And I think that the number was 65,000 less people have gone back to work.
Yeah, that sounds correct.
So there's work for you somewhere, Ken.
I was sort of thinking that I would try to get a list of those 302,000 discounts.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Provide that.
Thank you.
Before you leave, who's our young farmer representative, young leader?
Our state young leader representative, and actually the chair of the state young leader committee is Wayne Gerke from,
I don't know where he lives.
I think the address
Kane County.
officially is Maple Park. Wayne lives on a farm on Ram Road in Maple Park. And Wayne welcomed Congressman Lauren Underwood to help him finish planting his last field of soybeans about a month ago. So Lauren Underwood actually planted the last soybeans on the Gerke farm this year. So we'll see if we can get her out in the fall and see how she did.
She'll enter the field with one more person might become available to work.
I was going to ask if that was your plan for this committee, is that we would all go out and
You can all go out and
put some time in the field.
well, maybe you want to work in the processing plants.
No, thank you.
All right,
Mr.
we'll
Chair-
move on.
Mr.
There'll
Chairman,
be
this
no,
is, Mr. Chairman, this is Alan.
Deborah?
Good morning. I just wanted to mention that in the June issue of Kane County Farmer, there's a front page story about the Teeple Barn scale model. And there are a number of us who felt vested in the Teeple Barn and were really sorry to have it be blown away by a Kansas sort of tornado. I just wanted to ask Mr. Arnold if that's going to be a permanent display or if it's just at the Farm Bureau for a limited period of time.
That is a permanent display. It was gifted to us by Joanne Lichtard of Hampshire or Burlington. She and her husband Richard built that model back in about 2005, and probably a year's worth of labor. It has incredible detail, and it is in our lobby, in what we call the country store in the lobby of our building, and will be a permanent exhibit there. So if you have time to go out and shop for local honey, come to the Farm Bureau and pick up your local honey and take a look at this incredible scale model.
She could also buy pork chops too.
And pork chops.
And they're good.
Yeah, they're excellent pork
And
chops.
302,000 other items.
Okay. Also farm choice.
Thank
Thank
Thank you, gentlemen.
That it, Deborah?
I really look forward to coming and seeing it and buying things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there will be no report from Northern Illinois Food Bank because she's somewhere else. Now we have, under C, future trends in agriculture and consumer engagement, Farm Bureau's very own Chris Magnuson, Illinois Farm Bureau Executive Director of Operations, News and Communications, better known as the repairman. Says, when I was on the board, if you had a problem, you just went to Chris and he repaired it.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. Is this good here, or would you like me to move? up to
You
the
sit
podium?
right there, it's
Sit right
just
there?
fine.
Okay. Well, thank you for the invitation. When Steve mentioned it and Matt made the offer, the chance to, because as Mike mentioned, he was on our board for 10 years and he asked me challenging and difficult questions. And so the chance to come back and have that opportunity again was too much to pass up. So I look forward to being able to visit, and nice to see Mike again. And Steve, as I bragged on to others, as Kane County is one of our best county farm bureaus in the state, and Steve's one of our best managers and is always a very forward thinker. I worked for the state office, which used to be in Chicago until the early 1960s, then moved to Bloomington. And we are the kind of link between, there's 93, I believe, county farm bureaus in the state. So we're very grassroots oriented with the county farm bureaus, but then we help support their efforts as well as work on things at the state level. And then there's a National American Farm Bureau as well. So, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to share some thoughts from my perspective, and occasionally I'll indicate maybe a Farm Bureau position, but some of this is just my thoughts based on working for 20 plus years with the Farm Bureau and how I see things emerging in agriculture. And there were, I guess, 4 areas. So you could talk about a lot of things, but 4 areas I thought might be of interest. Wanted to talk about just the climate, the whole climate change, conservation, carbon sequestration, the role that agriculture's in a intersection of that, and talk a little bit about how farmers are looking to participate in that. Technology is driving a lot of industry and just the way we live, but it's a major element within agriculture and farmers as well. And so I'll just highlight some of the ways that's impacting our future in farming and agriculture. Talk a little bit about just markets in the future, and just give you a little bit of background. Again, you're in an interesting place here because you have you have such a strong agriculture farming area to the west part of your county, but you're on the edge of suburbia and you have that intersection with consumers and farmers markets and local foods and all of that. And then just talk about how we engage consumers. Consumers are, I think, ever increasing in terms of their interest in how their food's produced, where it's produced, and how we're responding to that. So just to talk a little on the climate and conservation element, I think that again, climate, as you all know, is something foremost on the minds of many, and the Biden administration, that's an important element. The energy bill being talked about at the state level has climate considerations as part of it. So I think we all, whether you agree or not on aspects of how it came about, I think we could probably all agree that it's going to be on the forefront of how decisions are made moving forward. And I think farming, I sense we've kind of gone from maybe being, and farmers are still very concerned about regulations that would add to their costs, because farmers are not able to, when they price their product, they're a price taker. They're not able to raise the price per se. They take in a commodity market what the price is available. So any increase in their cost to produce is concerning, but I think they're also seeing opportunities, and that's where it's maybe shifted in recent years. I think agriculture, of all those that have a portion of contribute to carbon, also have the ability to capture it, and we're seeing the opportunity to capitalize on being part of a positive contribution, as opposed to some of the negative aspects. We very much believe in an incentive-based, voluntary approach to carbon capture and rewarding farmers. Some of the main ways that comes about is through the whoops, I'm supposed to change the slide. I'm sorry. There we go. Through the third bullet on the, just the no-till, the tillage practices make a difference with the soil. Cover crops can, and which are something that's emerging, more and more farmers are using, and a lot of data and research is going into looking at cover crops are another opportunity. And then just things like crop rotation, just farming practices that can have, again, a positive impact. But there are costs associated with these. And so farmers are really at the stage now of really trying to understand those costs, what the returns are. There's talk on the public level from Secretary of Agriculture Vilsack about the role that USDA can play in this, but there's also private industry that are paying farmers for these practices and the carbon they would sequester. But it's but there's a lot to be still figured out. I mean, the pricing is still variable. A lot of these contracts are long-term in nature. There's questions from farmers. Have I been no-tilling for many years because that technology's been around for a while? Do I get credit for that, or does it have to be someone who's just converting their land? We would want those farmers that are they call it the burden of additionality to get that recognition. Early adopters are concerned, do I get into a contract now that at a price and then that price goes up and I'm locked in? And so just lots of questions, a lot to be sorted out, I think, but there is a lot of interest, and this is certainly something in the years ahead that there'll be a lot more movement towards, I think, and things the market will kind of form. And again, there'll be an opportunity for agriculture and farmers to participate. All these things I mentioned too, I talked about on the kind of the climate, the carbon being released in the air, but there's the whole water quality and the nutrient loss reduction strategy in the state of Illinois. And these and other things can help essentially take crop protection that's put on the soil and capture it before it gets into the water supply. And so there's a lot of effort to do that as well. So yes, sir.
For us non-producers, what's an example of a cover crop? Is it like clover? Or?
Yeah, clover would be an example. Radishes, things that you put down after your harvest in the fall that you put down just until spring typically. And it's just there to keep the soil so it doesn't blow away or erode, and also can help, again, capture some nutrients and things. And there's benefits to the soil, but there's, of course, a cost to put that in. And there's different experimentation. Livestock producers, their cover crops that they can have the cows go out on and eat. And so there's some nutritional value. They're looking, I think, at things that could be harvested maybe before. So but you're right, the things like radishes, clover, those kind of things, usually on a very short term, again, just kind of in between crops.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, for your incentives, the payments for conservation and practices for carbon capture, et cetera, who do those payments come from to the farmers? There's
two markets right now. There's the public market, I would call public government, things through the USDA, where there are conservation programs where you might take even land out of production into a conservation reserve and be paid for that. And they're looking at maybe expanding those, or it could be that, again, there'd be some support to offset costs farmers would have for cover crops. There's a small amount, like the Illinois Department of Agriculture provides some funding to help farmers do that. It's a pretty small amount, and but it could envision those government funding of those growing. And then there's the private market. And I'm far from an expert in this, but there's companies like Indigo, and my understanding is what they would do is work with you as a farmer, and then and they would pay you to do these practices. And then there's a credit for the carbon that you have captured that doesn't go. And then you go to a company that is emitting carbon and in a carbon trading, and then they do a transaction there. So they're paying farmers to capture the credits, and then working with industry who pay them for those credits. So, but again, so it's really interesting and exciting, but there's a lot of you know, a lot to, it's just like an early stage of the market. So, you know, I think people are trying to figure out what is a legitimate way to price it, and what is this relationship between the private versus the government funding? How do you verify the results and some of those kind of things?
And how would a farmer get involved in a situation like that? Through the Farm Bureau?
If they were,
Pardon?
there are USDA offices that for USDA funds for these private companies, and there are more than one, but that's just something where they would make contact with that company. Our role, as I see it, and Steve might have thoughts, is just try to get information to our farmers so they know the options, you know, and we're trying to do that to just lay out a little what I'm doing here, but there's people who know a lot more about it and can do an hour-long presentation instead of 5 minutes and really walk through, you know, here's the things you need to consider, here's the things you need to know, those kind of things.
Our USDA offices in DeKalb, it's off of Peace Road. So it's a combination of
Yeah.
3 counties, DuPage, Kane, DeKalb.
Just to add too, there are lots of webinars and information out there about the ecosystem markets. And there's one actually going on right now, starts at 11 actually, 4 days. And I'll send everybody the link because of course, you know, today will have been missed, but it is part of helping demystify the private markets and what they have to offer. And I'll send you the links because those will all be recorded. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But the more, again, as Chris mentioned, the more information, the better.
Now, last thing I'd mention on that is there will be a new farm bill in 2 to 3 years. And the farm bill provides some different funding support for farmers. Some of it is in conservation programs. Some of it is tied to just supporting if there's variance in prices and things. And this is just my opinion, and it's something but Farm Bureau will keep an eye on, is I could envision where, again, dollars shift to support more conservation or supporting farmers who do these practices, because there is a public good, you know, for them using their land to help from an air quality, water quality standpoint. So it'll be something to keep an eye on. So moving along to the, just kind of shifting now to some of the emerging areas in technology, and there's a lot of different ways, as I mentioned earlier.
Question, please.
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mavis Spades, question, please. Do you feel like the farmers are okay with doing this? Are they going to be eager or reticent or okay? Are they going to push back on this?
I think it's, I'll be honest, I think a few years ago, there was probably a little more hesitation. I think now they're seeing some of the opportunities, or maybe seeing the shift in public attitude for climate programs. But there's still, you know, if you're a farmer, you're still concerned about how much, you know, what are my costs going to be? How much is the income opportunity? If it's only, you know, $10 an acre, that's not going to necessarily attract a lot of attention. But if it's more than that, you know, and that offsets your time and your expenses to implement, and I think there's a growing interest in it.
Great.
You know, so I think it will continue to evolve. Again, I think our approach is always put the information out, provide and prefer a voluntary and then with incentives and encouragement for farmers, as opposed to a mandated regulatory environment.
Great. So we have to build a good business case for them. Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yep. Well said. So then looking on the technology side, again, automation, robotics are certainly something. Mike would know about this in the dairy industry that he's been in. It's an early area where just for the lack of farm labor is part of it, just sometimes efficiencies, just ways to and you made a good reminder on it. It's not just farmers, but in you know, the industry, John Deere and et cetera, there's ways that they can automate because of the challenges with attracting labor. Artificial intelligence, the use of drones, remote sensors, satellites to gather data, you know, instead of walking literally, you know, you would walk fields to scout for pests or, disease problems. And if you can do that where you have a drone that flies over and can take photos, that you can cover a lot more ground and just, again, more efficient to do that. And again, these sensors and things of that nature. Precision agriculture, which does have a good environmental benefit as well, where you, and that's kind of the picture up there with the monitor in either tractor or combine. That can, all of the data is in on the soil, types of soils and whatnot, and then and again, you can overlay into from a pest standpoint. And then when your precision means that when you're putting on crop protection or you're putting on fertilizer, you're only, instead of doing a uniform amount across the field, you're putting in the amount that is needed. Certain, quality of soils need more or less. So it's kind of the equivalent of, instead of hiring an exterminator to spray the whole house for ants, you just spray the certain spots where you need help. And so it reduces the amount of crop protection and fertilizer. So that reduces expenses for farmers and is also better for the environment. So that's a plus. Blockchain, which I could not describe how that works, other than I know it's it helping through the algorithms, et cetera, to be able to track products. And this kind of gets to the consumer interest I mentioned that I believe will only grow, where people will want to know where their food came from, the steps along the way. Certainly that's more true for items that you consume directly, like lettuce and fruits and vegetables, et cetera. But it'll move towards commodity groups as well, because you can, at a more cost-effective way, have maybe a high oil soybean or a certain quality and a food quality in corn and whatnot, and through this technology be able to track and segment those crops in a more cost-effective way. Livestock technology, again, a lot of things around animal health, where you can monitor the health of your animals and just learning things, nutrition data, like everything else. It's more data driven. Farmers, lots of data collected, lots of data used, and the more they use, the better they're able to farm and take care of their animals. And then finally, the indoor vertical farming, that is an area that I think is becoming more, through technology, becoming more cost effective and more practical, and would envision there will be growth in that area as well. So talking a little about just the markets for our crops in Illinois, and I think this would by and large be true. Steve could say for sure in Kane County, primarily still the bulk amount of our crops that are grown are commodities, which means they're grown in large amounts, and they're all the same, just like fuel and energy, but it's corn, soybeans, to a little lesser degree wheat in Illinois, but corn and soybeans, and then pigs and cattle and dairy, a little less of that in Illinois, but still a dairy presence. So those are the major crops, and exports are really important for farmers and for these crops. 95% of the customers live outside of the United States. I don't think the United States, I don't think we need to eat anymore. I know I don't. I need to eat less, and I don't think so. We're not going to upgrade our diets generally, but we're so blessed in this country that even those who are maybe not as well off are still in a better position than probably 2/3 of the rest of the world that lives on about $2 to $3 a day. And so as economies improve around the world and their standard of living improves, usually the first thing that's upgraded is their diet, and they eat more meat, more proteins, generally eggs, milk, and that results in more. And the U.S. is such an efficient and quality producer of ag products that it's actually an area where we have a trade surplus. We export more than we import, and so it's one of those industries for our country that we can benefit in terms of exporting around the world, and that's what we need to do to continue to grow. So, and the long-term outlook is positive again, as countries, particularly China. China, by the way, it's kind of interesting. They are very much pork eaters. There are 50 times as many pigs in China as there are in the U.S. They have about 3 or 4 times our population, but 50 to 1 in terms of the number of pigs. So that's and so it's a lot of soybeans and to a lesser degree corn that's sold to China. And so trade agreements tariffs, it's been kind of a roller coaster in recent years with some of that, but those make a big deal to farmers, and we're always advocating for trade agreements because we feel we can benefit from fair trade of our ag products around the world. One of the areas, though, I think is if you're looking longer term, will be something to keep an eye on, something that I think research needs to be done to look at more markets in the corn and to a lesser degree, soybeans. The biofuels, about a third of the corn crop in Illinois, about a third of the Illinois corn crop goes into ethanol. And as there's a movement towards electronic vehicles over time, that's a lost market. I think in the interim, ethanol is being positioned as a transition fuel because of the air quality benefits while combustion engines are still in place. But I think most people think that, the car manufacturers are moving towards electric. And so that's something to keep an eye on. Then, so then I view it as there's kind of this big commodity market that many farmers are involved in, but there's also the value added or the more identity preserved market. And I think farmers are very interested in that. Particularly they were during several years recently where prices were low for corn and soybeans. We went through about a 6-year down period. Now they have dramatically increased in the last year. But the margins tend to be low on commodity crops. So opportunities like growing food for a farmer's market or for local foods or CSA or agritourism or even new crops. Hemp gets a lot of attention in Illinois, albeit still very small. But I think there are these kind of emerging opportunities and will continue to be. And as I mentioned, as technology gets better to be able to track crops and those kind of things, I can see that market continuing to grow. And I do see consumers continuing to want to be interested in how their how their food is grown and this opportunity to support local food markets. And we saw during the pandemic the challenges with like meat supply when large meat processors had to close down because of COVID and the need for smaller local kind of markets. Again, to be realist now, that those are very small compared to the overall volume that's produced, but there are certainly a lot of opportunities for growth, and I expect that to grow. So the last item I'll just touch on is a little bit engaging with consumers. And again, I think Kane County Farm Bureau and your committee, et cetera, do a great job of this. And having people on the farm, like Steve mentioned, is still one of the best ways to create that experience. So I think we're very fortunate that people are interested in their food. They're interested in farming. So it's something we I think have a great opportunity to tell our story. We try to do it through things like Illinois Farm Families is a coalition of the corn, soybean, beef, pork, dairy, and Illinois Farm Bureau. They bring different people out to the farm, and they also have a website, watchusgrow.org, where they have farmers answer questions. We're really looking at, we as in the Illinois Farm Bureau, how we can make efforts to bridge the urban-rural divide that we see, not only affecting how people view food, but just we have Chicago or downstate and, just a lot of things where there's kind of a divide between rural and urban, and we're trying to do what we can to help bridge that and gain perspectives in that area. We've had a long effort of Ag in the Classroom. I think I might have saw that on your agenda later. So that continues and putting a lot of effort into teaching young people about agriculture. And then we're part of the Agri-Food Alliance, Illinois Agri-Food Alliance, which is a group that involves some urban concerns. Chicago and the Chicagoland area has a long history as an agriculture business. It's still the largest food sector of food manufacturing in the country in the Chicago area. Of course, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and there's just a lot of historical connections into Chicago. And this alliance kind of tries to take the production side, the food side, the manufacturing, and the urban interest with food and work together on areas of interest. So that's a quick overview. I hope I didn't take too long, Mr. Chairman, but I'd welcome any questions anyone would have.
We all want to learn.
Good. Thank you.
We all want to keep eating. Are there any other questions?
I had one, but I was going to hold it till the end because I'm worried that we're short on time.
Oh, really? Wow.
History is made.
Oh, you do what you want. Want to ask it now?
Well, I just, so about the new markets, my wife has suddenly signed us up for one of these weekly delivery of a big box of vegetables from a local farm, and I know a number of people are doing that. And I think on a mini scale, they're discovering that the distribution system is where things can break down. He gets it, but he hires somebody to bring it, and if that guy doesn't show up, it doesn't show up. Is that, you see a lot of the specialty markets, is that at this point anything more than like a blip on the radar screen of the market for that kind of thing? Or is it something that you see as becoming more of a trend, either because people want to know where their food came from, or it's just better when they get it direct from the producer?
It's a great question. And my view is it's kind of a yes and yes. To be honest, if you're just looking at volume, it is still very small. I mean, a really small percentage of the food would be done or would be local in that sense. But I do think that's emerging, and I think that can grow. And I think as they try to solve some of the problems that you mentioned, I anticipate that will grow, particularly in areas like here where you're at the intersection with the urban areas, maybe lesser in some other parts of the state or Midwest where you don't have the urban population. But I think it's definitely an area of growth, but it's still tiny. I couldn't even give the percentage, but it'd be less than 1%, probably a fraction of a percent to the total. Steve, do you?
I think that's true. We have a number of CSA farms, community supported agriculture farms here in King County, and I think that it's a great risk management tool for those types of operations, whether they're selling from a farm stand on their own farm or they're selling at a farmer's market. The CSA provides a way to have a commitment for that production throughout the year and a way to provide revenue early in the growing season. So it's definitely a win-win for the consumer or for the producers, and I think for the consumers also. I think there's a little bit of struggle if you're relying on everything coming from a local farm. There's a little bit of a struggle with the seasonality. How many cucumbers do you need in a particular week? But it's definitely a great thing for producers, and I think there's a lot of opportunity in this area when you look at a county with 550,000 people and relatively few farms in comparison.
You could do that yourself and go to Klein's with their big box, and
Yes.
every week you could buy the vegetables you want for your house. We were really lucky in this area of the availability of good food. Is there any more questions? All right, we'll move on
Opie's got a
to,
question, Chairman.
who would that be?
Be Mr. Cope.
Hi, Tommy.
Mr. Chairman, I have two questions, actually. I'll save the right to repair is a big issue at the coffee shops, and I was wondering if we could just touch base on that briefly, and if it is a real live issue. And it is a concern amongst the farmers. We're paying huge money, and the rates for field mechanics are $200 an hour, and it's not covered in their insurance. So I was curious if you could answer that question. Thank you.
Yeah,
And then I have another question.
it is an issue. And I know there's been some legislation. I've forgotten the status of that, but and for those that may not be aware, this would be, a new, as I understand it, I'm not an expert in this, but the the equipment is very high technology and very expensive, but manufacturers don't want a farmer or someone who's not authorized to repair that. Or if they do, you can void the warranty or affect your resale. But as the gentleman mentioned, that can be expensive, and many farmers and are handy mechanics and are used to working on their own equipment. So it's just kind of a challenge where newer equipment, I hope I'm explaining this right. There's the manufacturers of the equipment, restrict who can work on it because of these high-tech computers and various things. And if it doesn't get repaired correctly, it can affect it down the road. But then you've got this cost issue. So it is an issue, and we do track it. And I could follow up with the exact standing of where the legislation is. I don't recall right at the moment.
Ken?
Shepro, oddly enough, we encounter that problem with our fire departments. Because we've got, and I guess many of the districts, got people who know how to repair it, or they think they do. And the same thing, if it's not driven to the, which is always tough when it doesn't run, to the manufacturer to let them do it, you run the risk that the insurance won't cover the work and the warranty is voided. So it's just an interesting juxtaposition of issues.
That's why we belong to the Farm Bureau, and we have people that look into that and try to get favorable legislation. Look at all your cars. Can't
Mr.
fix
Chair,
it by the
Gumps?
shade tree anymore. Michelle?
Yes, if I can get a bill number on that, I'd be glad to do a little digging into it to see what I can find out.
Or even a sponsor if you don't have a bill number.
Yeah.
I will do some checking on that and get back. And Matthew, could I follow up through you? Okay.
And Michelle is on our legislative committee, and they're very active in seeing what's going on, what they can do to make sure it benefits the real people here in Kane
This
County.
proposed state legislation or part of the
I have no idea.
Farm Bill?
It would be at the state level, to my understanding. And I think I believe we are supportive of the right to repair, but I know we get a lot of pressure from the John Deeres and others who have concerns about that. So, and I'm not sure, again, on the status of the legislation. I'll check.
Any other questions or comments?
That's Mr. Chairman, Tom Colby.
Yeah, that's right. This is the second question.
The second question was, I've got a serious concern about the weather in our neighborhoods, and I was curious if I have an idea I'd like to pass by you. And is there any way that you would consider doing Mr. Chairman Kenyon, if you could consider doing a rain dance for us?
A rain dance. He wants you to do a rain
yeah.
dance.
I intend to wash my car this afternoon, and that usually works. And
I'll do a rain dance for everyone.
And my wife will water her plant vegetables, and that usually helps out a little bit. So
that usually does the trick. Okay.
I would
Well,
suggest
thank
you
you.
schedule an outdoor event that can't be canceled or moved indoors.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Stephen?
Mr. Chairman, the legislation is House Bill 3061, the Digital Fair Repair Act.
One more time, 3061?
3061, that's correct. House
Okay.
Bill 3061.
Oh, thank God for these phones.
Yes. Steve reminds me of my children.
Intelligent telephones.
Yeah, I ask a question and my children have the answer right away. Now you're just like them. Very good.
If they're not, we'll move on to a presentation, Juvenile Justice Center, Farmers and Classrooms, Matt Tansley.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I think Claire is going to bring up my slides, and I think you've still got the remote. I can go. Oh, thanks. Well, today I'm happy to talk a bit about a program that I've previewed in a few prior meetings. And this is a new series that's being launched as part of the Juvenile Justice Center Farm to School program. And it's really meant to be a boost for the curriculum program that has been developed since the USDA grant program started, because we really wanted to develop a customized curriculum program at the JJC so the students have a very all-encompassing educational experience related to agriculture and growing food and other aspects of that as well. And so this is a new piece of that. And it's really meant to bring farmers into the classroom and give the students more of a direct interaction with professionals in the field. And just to kind of look at the Farm to School program from the 10,000 foot level. So we are winding down the USDA grant term. And so I just wanted to kind of recap some of the major activities that we've completed so far. So we just have a handful of items that we're wrapping up this summer. And one of those does include the Farmers in the Classroom series. And that was one of the newer program ideas that we added the last time that we updated the budget and the project plan for the USDA grant program. So we've been happy to get that underway within the last several weeks. And so really the idea of this program is to create a career development component of the curriculum program so that the students of the JJC have the chance to interact with farmers and to get a better understanding of what types of careers there are related to agriculture. And so this is a series program. And so with this first iteration, we're looking to recruit an active farmer to start, but in the future it could be any number of professionals related to agriculture, not necessarily a farmer, but it could be food processing, transportation, any number of other careers related to that. But for this first launch of the series, we're looking to recruit an active farmer. And as part of this program, we're asking them to create a short video guided tour of their farm. And so since we can't bring the students to the farm, obviously, so this is really the best opportunity to give the students the chance to see what's actually happening on the farm so they can see what different types of production activities are taking place. What are the different pieces of equipment and farm buildings and infrastructure, and just kind of get a sense of how everything works together and how these farms work as organizations and businesses. And so that video is going to be pre-recorded. And so as part of the presentations that are given in the classroom, then the videos will be shown. And so that'll be a point where the farmer can talk, in a bit more detail about their farm and have more dialogue with the students about what they've been able to observe through the videos. As far as the promotion of this program, I want to point out that the Juvenile Justice Center does have a very diverse student population. So it does have youth from Kane County, but it also draws youth from other areas around the county. And in recognizing that, we wanted to, recruit farmers that have different types of experience growing. We certainly did promote this to our contact list of Kane County farmers, both through the newsletter that we manage and the Farm Bureau and Kane County Connects. But we also wanted to promote this to other organizations that work with youth in more urban settings as well. So we promoted this to the Urban Advocates for Urban Agriculture, and the Urban Growers Collective, which are two organizations that operate out of Chicago, and they work with urban growers and support their efforts as well. So I want to add too that this will be a compensated opportunity. So recognizing that farmers would be taking time away from growing during the middle of the growing season, we wanted to make sure that we were compensating them for the time away from working on their farms, as well as just the work that they'd be putting into preparing for the presentations and recording the videos. We don't anticipate that to be an overly burdensome time commitment, but just given that it is during the middle of the summer, we want to compensate them for that. But we also see the opportunity in the fact that this is a very active time on farms with planting and harvesting kind of continuing throughout the season, especially for specialty crops. And so we wanted to capture as much of that activity as we could, especially with the video tours that the farmers would be recording. And so looking ahead to the next steps of the program, so the applications will be open through tomorrow. We've already received, as of today, over a dozen applications. So we have a really good pool of applicants that the teachers at the JJC are going to be able to look through and kind of figure out, what types of production activities, what types of farm operations they would want to showcase for their students. And to the extent possible to kind of coordinate that with the curriculum that's being taught throughout the year. And so the JJC is going to be reviewing those applications, and then we'll probably reach out to a few of the top candidates to make that final selection. And then we're going to give the farmers through the end of July to record their videos and then to schedule those presentations in the classroom. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have a question for you. Could you see in the future that you could have a library of these videos that can be, I think of all the people I know that started a garden for the first time in their life, and the how-to videos for that. Then they could click on your website and how to grow whatever, potatoes and I think that'd be a pretty neat thing for the people of the county. We'd even share with other counties too.
Yeah, that was certainly the intent with the JJC, was to help them build essentially a library of videos. I mean, once the videos are recorded, they can show those to new students that are coming into the JJC as well. But that does certainly open the door to opportunities to sharing those videos, more widely, potentially with other schools or other organizations that could benefit from those.
I'd also be interested in what gardening books you would recommend, because if you go over to Barnes and Noble, the gardening section is about that big. So you pretty much got to know what you're looking for over there.
Right.
If you could put that on your website.
I'll add it to the list.
Okay. If there's no more questions of Finn, we'll get
I got a quick,
another question.
no, on the bill, extensive research indicates that it was assigned to the Cybersecurity, Data Analytics, and IT Committee and re-referred to the Rules Committee on March 27th, where it sits.
Is this language of saying it's dead?
The re-referral to the Rules Committee basically means it's in deep freeze or dead unless somebody brings it up. And of course, they're technically out of session now.
Michelle, there's something for you to do. You could rebirth this bill that is in the Rules Committee.
All right, I'm on it.
And I know she will.
It actually had an impressive list of co-sponsors, but I won't bore you with
All
that.
right. Excellent.
Are there any other questions of Matt? And we want to talk about recent approved food and agriculture legislation? Tony?
Okay, so over Memorial Day weekend, the state passed a slew of legislation, and there are several that pertain to food and agriculture. So we're going to give you a little bit of a recap just so that you're aware of what's happened recently. Congress passed a budget that I just found out yesterday was vetoed by the governor, but it's just requesting an amendment that doesn't actually, it's not requiring a change to any funding numbers or anything like that. So would expect that to go soon and go through in the coming weeks. But there's some exciting opportunities in there, including increased funding for nutrient loss reduction. The nutrient loss reduction strategy is getting a funding boost of, I think, $2 million at least. There's a few other funds that are also seeing their budgets increased, and they're also expanding into nutrient loss reduction as part of their goals. So we could see more funding than that $2 million allocated to nutrient loss. $500,000 for farmers market nutrition assistance. That means that people who are on food assistance will be able to use some of the resources that they get to purchase local produce at farmers markets, which is good in that they'll be able to get some fresh and local produce. And it's also good because it expands the customer base for some of our local producers. Also, the fall covers for spring savings program has been approximately doubled. This is a program that gives farmers $5 an acre to grow cover crops. So that also sort of ties into nutrient loss and some of the other climate related topics that were talked about by the Farm Bureau reps here today. Protecting your right to garden, the state has now passed a bill that says that local governments cannot prohibit vegetable gardening. So there still may be ways to regulate it in terms of things like setbacks or something like that, but it is now the right of Illinois residents to grow vegetables on their property. The House passed a resolution that references a legal settlement in which the USDA acknowledged that it had abused Black farmers for generations by approving only a fraction of financing requests of eligible Black farmers, by delaying loans until after planting season and withholding other key payments. And so the House is urging the Illinois Department of Agriculture to try and study the effects and types of land loss from the Civil War, the post-Civil War period all the way up until now, to try and get a better understanding of how those discriminatory practices affected Black farmers, and maybe give us an explanation as well for why the number of Black farmers in the state has declined over time. And lastly, Senate Bill 2007 is addressing cottage foods, which are foods that are prepared in a residential home kitchen and sold directly to consumers. Until now, they had only been able to be sold as a business anyway. They could only sell at farmers markets. This is opening that up, so now they can have more opportunities for selling their goods. They can do so at fairs and festivals. Online retail, home delivery are now options, and then also pick up at the home in which those goods are made. It also allows for them to create new products, including buttercream icing, which I guess is going to really broaden the number of baked goods that can be made and sold. Low acid canned foods is something that had been previously prohibited, I guess, for canned foods in order for safety reasons and long-term shelf stability. They have to modify the pH level to get it to within a certain range to reach certain safety standards. But since these are not the sort of goods that people are necessarily buying to keep on their shelf for 5 years or something like that, they've opened it up. And then also fermented and acidified foods are allowed, which is going to include pickled items. So there's a lot more opportunity there. There's going to be some regulation changes. We've reached out to the health department. They're still trying to wrap their heads around what that's going to mean for them. But this will be going into effect starting next year, and should give people who are looking to add a little bit to their income or to start businesses in food production, it'll give them some more opportunity.
Are there any questions, comments, encouragement? I was reading an article in the magazine that the John Deere puts out of all the food fraud. You can buy honey and you can doctor it with something else to spread it out. And I think the big one is olive oil. So we have USDA people that have to ensure that doesn't happen. And of course, you don't want horse meat in your hamburger either.
I just think that when you make a list of somebody that says, hey, I got these vegetables, how about I go sell them? And if you've made a list of all of the regulations at the federal, state, and local level, you might be discouraged.
We don't like to be discouraged. Is there any other questions? Okay, we'll move down to internal riverboat request, farmland preservation. Oh, Janice Hill.
Oh, yes.
She's always looking for money for us.
That's right. Well, you're right, I'm looking for money. And wanted to present to you the request that staff will be presenting at the Riverboat Committee, to the Riverboat Committee, and our request for 2022 that will eventually make its way to the county budget. This reflects a couple things. Our 20-year anniversary, everything that we've learned from the program in 20 years, and then moving forward with our 2 farmland protection programs now. We have the traditional ALE, I'm going to use that acronym, ALE program that we've used in the past, and then the new RCPP funding stream. That's the program that I've been talking about for the last few months that includes all the conservation practices that Chris just described. So that's part of the package that a farmer gets when they participate in land protection moving forward with the RCPP. So we have the 2 programs going side by side moving forward. Again, voluntary, and on the RCPP using both the public and the private funding, and we'll get into that a little bit, but we still need riverboat money to move forward. So first of all, the request to the riverboat will be $500,000. And I'm going to describe a little bit more about the details of that and how that would be used, kind of like the top line for that. First of all, we're going to take some of that encumbered cash on hand. We'll take all of that and we're going to move it into the fiscal year 22 budget. And that money will be used for purchasing easements, the match, and everything else, contractual services and all those things that we would typically do. The budget will look much, much larger than it ever has in the past because we're moving that encumbered funds right into the budget. And then we're asking for $500,000 instead of what we had had in the past, which was the past few years, $300,000. Now I'll explain how that will be used over there on the right on that text box there. So right now we have that 2,856,000 number. That's encumbered cash on hand, has been reserved for farms that have been, that for easements right there. We have that. We have the transactional cost. That's basically all the cost it takes to do the easements. And then we have that $500,000 riverboat money request that we're asking for this year that brings us over that $3 million threshold, $3,421,142. So that's how we get to that number. Now you might want to understand, how does that look when you think about the farms that would be selected for the programs and would move forward? And remember, most of these farms, in fact, most of them are all on the waiting list, waiting for funding, and we have more beyond that. But to give you an idea of what that would be, when you take that, so this doesn't include any administration cost or anything like that. When you look at that, you can see the breakdown of the 2 million, the cash on hand, that would be specific for easements. 450,000 of the total 500 that we're requesting from Riverboat. We're going to reserve 50,000 for those transactional costs. And that brings you up to that total easement purchase. I'm estimating, like I always have to do, about $2,000 per acre for our local match. That means about $4,000 an acre for each easement, because we're going to get half from the federal government and we're half. The good news is that we're secured with that money already through RCPP, because we're in that. The federal money is already there with our name on it, which is awesome. And so that means approximately, around 1,650 acres that we can protect in this year. Now, what's different is that in the past, under the last 20 years, we've done these transactions one at a time, individual with the owner. What we'd like to do, using our experience of how these things work best, is to bring these farmers together that have been selected and do much of this in a cohort style. It's easier in a lot of ways. It will be, I think, easier for everybody to navigate three things. You have to navigate the federal bureaucracy, which is probably the hardest because we don't have control over that. So we're all doing the federal paperwork at the same time. Then there's our internal county process. We, the staff that has to manage that, that's all happening at once. And then third, there's a lot of support that's going to be needed for these farms that are going through, because they're going to be doing this conservation farming. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Instead of farmers getting one-on-one support individually, they can get some of it as a group. And we can hire people to deliver that as a group. So I feel like, yes, some things will be very private. Obviously, some aspects of the transaction are very private. But the portions that are just, routine, but still cumbersome, we're going to try to make it as smooth and easy as possible. This also reflects the fact that the federal government has changed their program rules and process, as they often do. Again, in the last year, they've changed it again. So they are now front loading their requirements. So a county, an entity, which is their verbiage, cannot apply for funding without having their match in hand. Well, thank goodness Kane County has allowed that to happen, because right now we couldn't even apply without that. In the past, it used to be we could apply, find out if we're going to get accepted for that farm or which farms, and then I could come to you and say, I need this amount of money for these farms. No, not anymore. You have to have all of it up front before you can submit your application to apply and secured. And
When you say upfront, you mean actually in hand?
In hand with proof designated, and then the requirements for those farms, also their eligibility information and some other things that are required of the farmer as well, that they would normally do much later in the process in the past. Now they have to have ready when they're walking in the door to apply, which means basically what we're doing is we're doing the work a year ahead of time, assuming we're going to get the money. That's basically what it requires of applicants, which cuts a lot of people out of the game completely. Lucky for us, we've been planning for this. Now, and we've had these farmers ready to go, but because we're adding a layer of this conservation requirement, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a bit, because this is what RCPP is also about. And as Chris Magnuson talked about today, there's still a little bit of uncertainty. What does that mean for my farm? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. But to back up just a little bit, because the federal government, when it comes to this stuff, they have their own language and their own acronyms. And they change, some of them change over time. Some programs peak, some drop, and it's very confusing. But this will give you an idea. This is a Farm Bureau graphic, as a matter of fact. It's a good thing that they do the research and put this out. But they're projecting funding levels for some of the conservation programs from 2018 and moving forward. And you can kind of see now the two on the far right, ASAP and RCPP, those are the farmland protection programs that we are now participating in. The ASAP is the one we've always been in, and the RCPP is the new one. The other three programs on the left are kind of conservation programs that are direct to farmers, right? As mentioned, you walk in to the local NRCS office, you apply for your money, that's one-on-one. Those things continue. The difference for our program is that the staff and we apply for money on behalf of our farmland protection farmers. And moving forward as a cohort, we're applying for that. Even better, the fact that we're part of RCPP, the RCPP lead, the conservation fund, has already applied for those EQIP conservation money, and they're set aside for us, the whole group, everybody in the state that's participating in this RCPP. So that really helps in terms of money for cover crops and things, because as Chris Magnuson said, there's not enough money to do all of these conservation incentives that people want farmers in Illinois to do. And it's emerging, right? And there's also the whole compensation factor for that. Now, this is all on the public side. We are also researching and writing grants and learning more about how to bring that private voluntary market to Kane County farmers, and we'll be doing that more too. So that farmers can pick and choose how to layer these benefits for themselves. So one farmer might choose to participate in a part of EQIP and then also pick a private provider and layer that up for his farm so he can maximize his benefits. But instead of sending that farmer out to all these places to do the research himself, we're going to bring it all to the table together. So that's a big change right there, but that's kind of the history of how that would work. EQIP is this program with the feds that offers a lot of this, the nutrient management that Chris talked about, where it's very specific. There are a lot more resources out there on that, especially in the private marketplace now, that we can bring to the table. They're willing to work with us. I already have contacts in that area and all of these other aspects. The problem is that Illinois has been very slow to attract EQIP dollars in terms of overall participation over the years. And then our area of Illinois has even less money coming from EQIP to this part of Illinois. If you're in central Illinois, you have a lot more participation than you do up here. Some of that, I feel, is the fact that we don't have that many federal staff people up here assisting our farmers on the farm to figure out how you use this program and how you access your federal money. And we're not going to get that. We have one person who covers a huge area. And that's not going to change. So in order to make our program work, we're going to need to hire contractual services to help us. They're called technical service providers. And we're going to have to bring them in and have them help navigate that system. Help us too. Remember, we are all planners on this side of the table. This is where about our area of expertise ends. We can bring you the resources, bring our farmers the resources, but we certainly are not crop advisors. And so we want to recognize that. And then I just wanted to remind you too of the program arc of this program and how we started really high with the funding in this program. 5 million to start, adding 1 to 2 million every year. And then it drops to 0 at the recession. Understandably, Riverboat dollars needed to go to hunger and housing and shelter and those things that were critical. During that time, though, we pivoted. That's when we launched our local food program, Growing for Kane. But all that time, our waiting list grew, right, for farms wanting to participate. But still, we were with the Ag Committee and with all of you, we've launched all these great programs leveraging our reputation. And so we always mention, even if it's a local foods program, we're leveraging the farmland protection reputation to bring that money to the table. So that 500K that might have been for local foods always mentioned the farmland protection program and all of that work. And so that's how, we've been able to grow the program. So that's part of why we're asking also for that 500,000. And then as part of all of this, we're going to ask to reserve and have budgeted to reserve some money for local match. And this is a really important piece too. There's a lot of money coming out of the federal government right now, some of which is just increasing existing programs. Some are brand new programs that have never existed through the rescue plan that are specific to agriculture. All require or will require most likely a federal match. And we want to be able to say, we can do this program and we have that match in hand, and we're going to do that same leverage of our reputation, our partnerships, and we have the match in hand. Of course, we would come to Ag Committee, and of course, we'd come to the board before being able to spend it. But again, in order to apply, you have to have that money, and the turnaround of these grants are incredibly fast. That's part of the federal screening process. And then, of course, as I always say, we have Matt Tansley, who knows that federal system and how to apply for putting it in their system, which again is a barrier. It's an intentional barrier, I believe. It's very difficult to load these grants. You can have the best written grant. We can work through all kinds of things, but if you can't get it in their system, loaded in time exactly the way they want, and it does vary grant to grant what they're looking for, then you can pretty much forget it. And Matt's been very, very helpful in getting those in and knowing that federal system. So with all of that said, that's the reason that we will be doing two things, requesting the $500,000 this year for Riverboat, moving the funds, the cash on hand funds right into this year budget, creating a cohort to bring all these farmers through. And then we'll be, I'd say probably one more important thing, will be measuring a lot of our investment to see how water quality, soil quality, and these things change over time. That's not a one-year thing either, and that's where a lot of the contractual funds will be used as well. And that will be to support the farmers as they're going through, bring in their resources, and then measure. And it's not just on farm, it's within that sub-watershed. And so, Jody, for example, has already been doing a lot of that water testing ahead of time. Now she's using funds from farmland protection for exactly that. She's getting those baselines to determine water quality, how much of it is coming from farm, how much of it is coming from the suburban areas, so that we can really distinguish what is happening and make those differences. And with that data, that also helps in terms of moving forward and getting more investment from other outside sources. So with that, did I miss anything? No. Okay. So with that, that's the budget presentation. So if anyone has any questions, or if you'd like to talk to Mark and I further before Riverboat, I think we are scheduled the first group in July 9th, I think, 8th, July 8th. So
What was the current year Riverboat allocation?
300,000.
You're saying also your office is open for walk-in business.
Yes,
Yes, right?
yes.
Right. Mr. Fraz?
I just have a kind of a big picture question, not so much related to your budget, but back when the program started, development was really hot and there was large planned communities being discussed all over the county, including out west and, for example, Virgil. And so a lot of our purchases ended up pretty far to the west, especially southwest. Development kind of took a major development, hot development, took a hiatus for the last 14 years or so. And so I'm just curious, has there been any discussion about, looking at properties closer into the critical growth area that are under imminent threat of development versus some of the parcels? I would think, as assuming the program is around for decades, we would move from east to west. And it just seems like we started out west during that period. But I'm wondering if we shouldn't move, focus more in the critical growth area.
It's a valid question and definitely requires further examination for a couple reasons. First of all, moving our new RCPP program is going to take more promotion and recruitment than just, having new paperwork, to your point. And we will need to make sure that we're reaching all farmers and farmers in all locations and all size farms. So we might have a very large farm and we might have some very small farms like growing for cane. We can handle all of those. Now, it's true, we have emphasized a lot in that southwestern quadrant of Big Rock and Caneville, and the Farmland Commission was prioritizing, suggesting to move further north in their priority selection. And I believe that's valid. Also, now that we're concentrating on conservation practices, the areas where the nutrient loss reduction strategy focuses that are the most critical are really in the far north quadrant. So that could become an even greater priority when selecting farms. And that would be based on county goals, right? The other challenge is that over time, you can never determine which farms are going to raise their hand to say, I want to go first in this, I want to participate now, versus I want to wait till next year in that. So there's always that balance because everything's voluntary. And it was, I think the question was asked earlier about, it was on the phone question about participation. It's kind of, I've learned from Farmland Protection is that they're early adapters who are like, I want to be at the front of the line. I want to be the first one. And then one of our farmers said to me early on, when we were just conceiving the program, I don't think we're ever going to do that. Not my family, no. And yet they've now participated twice. And they're one of my favorites, so it's very, you just never know. And because it is voluntary now that we're adding these conservation practices. But I agree. I think in general, further east, if we could just dream about it and pick, it would be great. I think further east and in those areas that are further at risk when it comes to water quality would be my preference. But you have to balance all that out.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Arnold?
Two quick observations and one question. I think you're right on the EQIP. I think there was not nearly as much focus or as much staff in Northern Illinois, but I also, if I remember correctly, the big push from NRCS when EQIP was first rolled out was largely for livestock. And that's because that was the approach in agriculture at that time to nutrient management, referred more to how do we manage the nutrients coming off of livestock operations as opposed to commercial fertilizers. In regards to cover crops, Tony talked about the fact that the budget next year for the Department of Agriculture will double that from $300,000, I believe, to $600,000. I don't know if Department of Agriculture will change that program, but right now first of all, $600,000 is enough money at $5 an acre to do 3/1000 of Illinois' farmland acres. And $5 an acre offsets about $60 an acre just in seed costs. So no time or no fuel. So as we're looking at things that are NLRS, are nutrient loss related, I don't think we get any bigger bang for our buck than anything that we can do to supplement cover crop payments, because there's a lot of interest and there's been a lot of research done as we've tried to move cover crops further north to find cover crops that work better for northern Illinois soils. And I think that's, again, the biggest bang for our buck probably that we get, and the most farmer interest in meeting NLRS standards. And then the question, the acreage on that first slide actually adds up to 50 more acres than was on the slide. It added up to 1694.
That could very well be, for sure.
Okay.
I did that very quickly this morning, just
Okay.
trying to give some estimates, but you are right. I'm sure I will work on that and fix that. And this is why, to your points on investment for conservation incentives, the federal and the public programs fall short. There's no question about it. And then the private voluntary markets, there are restrictions, and there are, trying to think what the word would be. There are hooks for those, right? That farmers are very wary of. And so that's why we are fundraising on our own for our own farmers to see what kind of conservation incentive package funds that we can raise in a different marketplace. And then leave that up to the farmer to choose which ones they're going to pick and layer. And a lot of it is what can they layer, and what can they layer with to achieve the outcome they need to achieve, because it's their farm, their outcome, right? We're looking at outcomes, and let them measure and let them be able to test and not get locked in, because that's a big part of what has been successful, is to be able to test and change and adapt. And if you get locked in, then you can't do that. So, but we have to be able to raise those outside funds, and we're working on that. But such good points, because also what's created statewide is not what works here. So that's why we're trying to create something that is customized for our farmers.
All right, we have to wrap this meeting up because we have to pay for overtime in this room. But I have a question, and I have two prizes. And the manager, Steve Arnold, passed out these forms. And what kind of a membership is this for?
Professional.
All right. And Mr. Shepro, you win two chances on a pickup truck. Wouldn't we like to see Ken Shepro driving into the lot with a 1972 Cheyenne 20 pickup truck?
1972?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And you got the back end, you could put lots of stuff in it. Your wife would.
Like
you
you
could
go to
bring-
garage sales all over the
Yeah,
county. Yeah.
your wife would love that.
All right.
Okay, then I have one other question.
Oh, I missed out on the question?
Yes, well, you got to stay. This is a fast-moving operation. He already bought one. Who is the presenter from Illinois Farm Bureau?
Steve Arnold.
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay. You win. She wins 2 tickets. Now we can see Janice Hill drive in their 72 pickup truck, loaded up with produce. Okay, let's see where we at.
Federal forms to fill out.
Yes, one form. We have no new business. We need a unanimous consent to place the reports on file. Shepro moves.
I ask for unanimous consent to place the reports on file.
Seemed like executive session. We need a unanimous consent for adjournment.
We don't have a roll call anyway, so take a
No.
motion.
Would you want to adjourn or not?
Yes, motion to adjourn.
Yeah, okay,
Second.
okay.
I can't
All in
vote
favor,
on it,
say
but I